Good morning. Welcome to the Three Rivers Podcast for Tuesday, October 22nd. I am your host, Ed Troop. Glad you could join us here on our Oneburg Facebook channel, Oneburg YouTube, or maybe you're listening back on Spotify. Joining me on the podcast this week is Rich Walsh from KDKA-TV Sports, CBS Pittsburgh. Rich, good morning to you. Welcome into the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Rich, you've been in Pittsburgh on the Pittsburgh sports scene for quite a while. I know you were at WPXI for a while and now KDK as well. You work with the legend, Bob Pompiani. We were talking about that just a little bit ago. But we appreciate you taking some time to come on the podcast this morning and join us to talk some Pittsburgh sports.
No problem. I love you guys over at Oneburg.
Rich, let's talk a little bit about the Pittsburgh Steelers coming off a 37-15 win this past Sunday night to get to 5-2 on the season. A little bit of a rough start for Russell Wilson. Comes in first series, got him down to a field goal. But then after that, 3 consecutive 3-and-outs. The Boo Birds were out at Acrisure Stadium. Just a few, not a whole bunch, a few chances for Justin Fields to come back in. But then Russell Wilson and the offense opens up. They take some shots downfield to George Pickens. They start moving the football, and ultimately Russell Wilson has a fantastic game, going 16 of 29 for 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions in the Steelers' Sunday night victory. Talk a little bit about that big win on Sunday night against the Jets and about Russell Wilson's debut in the Steeler uniform.
Hey, and I was in the camp of starting Justin Fields, and I want to admit that I was wrong. I thought Fields should have been the starter. He was 4-2. A lot of the guys you could feel in the locker room really liked Justin Fields, but I was completely wrong. Mike Tomlin knew what he was doing by making the switch. And the only reason I think a lot of us had questioned it, not only was the record of Justin Fields pretty good, 4-2, like I mentioned, but also all the mishaps with the quarterback situation, with the Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph over the last couple of years, made you just question this decision right now. I thought the best way to attack this should have been Justin Fields until he makes some kind of huge mistake. Then you in-game make a change with Russell Wilson. Well, I admit I was wrong. Russell Wilson definitely is the better quarterback, mainly because he's a veteran. He can see these defenses. He can make switches. He can make changes, whether it be an audible or an RPO or something like that would switch it up. Where Justin Fields, I think he was handcuffed a little bit, not with the playbook, but the plays. So you could see that it was much more open. I know the one thing that frustrates me with the Steelers, and I watch it every single week from the press box, is first down. We all know, everyone in the stands knows that they are going to run the ball. I think now with Russell Wilson back there, this playbook's going to be a little bit different. The offense is going to be a little bit different. And you can see the way George Pickens played was a little bit different too, because he knew he was going to get the ball. He was making plays everywhere. And when you have a guy like that out there, that George Pickens, not the George Pickens we saw a couple weeks ago, but this George Pickens, I think the Steelers can do some good things this year.
Yeah, Pickens certainly opened up his game quite a bit on Sunday night, went for 5 catches for 111 yards and his first touchdown of the season. Hard to believe that in game number 7, he gets his first TD of the season. But just to go on to your point, a different quarterback, right? Justin Fields makes plays more with his legs on the running game, taking off, especially under pressure, where you have Russell Wilson more stepping up in the pocket, throwing the football downfield. Rich, that was a big decision by Mike Tomlin last week to go there, because that was not a popular decision. A lot of people, and there was some reports that came out that within the organization, a lot of people thought he should have stayed with Fields, but ultimately this was a Mike Tomlin decision. Tomlin gets criticized a lot, all those years, the consecutive years of above 500 football or better. But the fact of the matter is they haven't won a playoff game since 2016. So a lot of criticism, but I think this is one area where, really Mike Tomlin should be complimented.
Yeah, 100%. It was the right move right now. That's what they brought Russell Wilson in here to be the starter. And I don't think they didn't make the switch. I want to get this straight. He did not make the switch because they promised him the job and then he was healthy. He's just a better quarterback. Justin Fields is a good backup right now. He's the guy that's going to they think highly of Justin Fields. Justin Fields potentially could be the quarterback moving forward, depending on what happens with Russell Wilson, if they could work some kind of deal out. But I think Justin Fields needs some time to learn behind a guy like Russell Wilson. He's never had that. He was in Chicago, and you see what happens to quarterbacks in Chicago. So I think, look, Justin Fields might be the best athlete on the team. I'm hoping they find a way to use him in some kind of role, whether it be short yardage, goal line, maybe to give the team a spark with a series. I'm a big advocate of making him Slash 2.0. I loved when Cordell Stewart was Slash. He was more popular as Slash than he was Cordell Stewart, the quarterback. That would be amazing if they could somehow revive that role. I don't know if Justin Fields can even run routes and catch, but I'm sure he can. But I like both those guys. And, I was the guy that asked him the question about, you're 4-2. Is this frustrating that you're going to be benched basically for Russell Wilson? He told me, no, he said he needed to play better. And he's right. I like that approach. I respect him a lot more for saying it like that than maybe another quarterback would have said it a different way here in the past. But he took full responsibility as to why they were 4-2, not 6-0. And I'm obviously, you could tell he's probably frustrated. He's not the starter. Everyone wants to be the starter, right? But Russell Wilson right now, you see it. He gives them a better chance at winning more games.
Yeah, absolutely, Rich. And that's one thing we talked about quite a bit here on the podcast the last few weeks, that as good as Justin Fields is, especially, again, making plays with his legs, one thing he lacked were touchdown passes and the ability to throw the football downfield. And Russell Wilson gives you that edge as long as it's the Russell Wilson that's healthy and ready to go. And I said all along that I felt the Steelers and Mike Tomlin and the organization had to at least see that and test that. That's why they went to him this past week, to see what they have in Russell Wilson as they move forward. And obviously they were pretty pleased with the results from this past Sunday night. Rich, I want to talk a little bit about the running game as well. Najee Harris, and you brought up a good point earlier. When you get the passing game going, then the defenses aren't going to stack 8 or 9 in a box and know that you're going to run every time on first down or second down. It opens up the running game, and it truly did this past week. Najee Harris goes for 21 carries, 102 yards, and a touchdown. The offensive line's been banged up, no doubt about that. They had to go to Ryan McCollum at the center position, Mason McCormick back in there as well. And Broderick Jones, who has struggled at times this season, was pretty quiet Sunday night, and that's a good thing, because when an offensive lineman's name is not being called, he's not being called for penalties, and he's not missing blocks. Overall, the offensive line did pretty well with the running game this past week, but it was ultimately set up by the passing game.
Yeah, they've done well the last 2 weeks, and you saw that with Najee Harris. And you get him the ball, he looks like a really good running back, right? These last 2 games. Prior to that, I mean, he was just hitting back of offensive linemen, and that's not going to get you anything. And plus, everyone on the other side knows when they're going to run. I mean, they were very predictable. I think with Russ Wilson makes them unpredictable right now. So I like Mason McCormick. I don't think that was a big drop off. Broderick Jones, he has the pedigree. He's played right tackle his entire career here with the Steelers. So I don't think the loss of Troy Fautanu, I mean, it was a big deal because he's a first-round draft pick. You want to get all the best players out there, but I kind of figured he would be the right tackle. Dan Moore's just been solid. That guy has gotten better. I know people have been trying to run him out of town since day one, but he's gotten better, and he's going to get paid this offseason. It's hard to play left tackle in the NFL, and he's doing it at a high level right now. But right now, that's one of the reasons. Let me go back to that quarterback. That's one of the reasons I thought that they weren't going to make the switch, because you had a Ryan McCollum in at center. You do have a Mason McCormick who's a rookie and is going to make mistakes. Even if he is good, he's going to make mistakes out there. Justin Fields gave you that ability to be a little bit more elusive and get out of the way, where Russell Wilson, he can be elusive, but he's also 36 years old. He's not the athlete he once was, and he doesn't have the speed as Justin Fields. So that was another thing. I think a lot of people questioned that move, just because of the running ability of Justin Fields compared to Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson, obviously, being a veteran quarterback, can see the field a little bit better and can make the adjustments, the audibles, and get the ball to George Pickens. I think that's the most important thing. But doing that allows this run game to get going. And this Steelers team, that identity is the run game, and they want to be able to run the ball. Arthur Smith wants to have that offense he had back in Tennessee with Derrick Henry, and you can see it's working the last 2 games. Look, they scored 69 points the last 2 games. We haven't. You got to go back to 2021, the last time they even sniffed 37 points. So they're doing something right the last 2 games, even though that Raiders game, they were helped out with a few roughing the passer penalties that allowed them to score points and get into a rhythm. But, it always helps when the refs help you out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely, Rich. We were talking about that. We do a Steeler post-game show here on Oneberg, Brian and I do each week. And we're talking about, as you just said, when was the last time you've seen the offense score 30 points in back-to-back games, let alone you added up what they did against the Raiders offensively and what they were able to do against the Jets this past week. It's just really good stuff. And, right now, Arthur Smith's offense is running at a high capacity with the run game and also with the passing game now that Russell Wilson's in there. Rich, I want to shift gears a little bit towards the defense. And, the turning point in that game this past week, no doubt, was when Beanie Bishop.
Yeah.
Call him whatever you want, right? Beanie
Yeah.
Baby, Bishop. He comes up with the big interception under 2 minutes that sets the Steelers up at midfield. That's when Wilson hit Pickens for the first touchdown of the season to make it 15-13 at halftime. But Beanie Bishop, 2 big interceptions this past week. The undrafted free agent out of West Virginia, making big plays in that slot corner position. And ultimately, I also thought the Alex Highsmith scenario of him getting back in there opposite side of TJ Watt was a big impact this week, getting him back healthy at the other outside linebacker position. The Steelers gave up the 15 points. They were down 15-6, and then no more. And in particular, Devontae Adams, no catches in the second half.
Yeah, obviously the turning point in that game was what you mentioned, that first interception by Beanie Bishop. And he said he watched it on film. He studied that play. He knew what Aaron Rodgers was going to do that. For a rookie, an undrafted rookie, to outsmart someone like Aaron Rodgers is pretty good. They're going to have a tough decision when Cam Sutton comes back here in a couple weeks, what they're going to do with that slot corner. But I think, obviously, Beanie Bishop has earned playing time, at least what he did the last game, because, that offense – you can see it from the stands, feeds off of what the defense does. That defense has made more splash plays inside the red zone than any other team in the NFL. And that's what they do, right? They make big plays, and that's how they've won games. You're sitting up in the stands or at home watching this game or in the press box like me, and you're like, the defense needs to do something. You keep saying that when the offense comes out slow, because that's the theme here in Pittsburgh. We've seen it for 3 and 4 years, slow starts. But when that offense comes out slow, you need that defense to do something, and they seem to do it every week. TJ Watt does something, even if he's not making sacks, he's forcing fumbles. And you're exactly right about Alex Highsmith. They need that guy back. He's one of the best run stoppers in the NFL, and he takes away pressure from TJ Watt. He allows TJ Watt, he frees up TJ Watt. And that's what makes this defense better. And when you don't have him in the lineup, I like Herbig. I think Herbig's going to be good, but he's not Alex Highsmith right now. And that was a huge loss for 3 games. But he's healthy. But you could see every replay they showed Alex Highsmith's getting help, and they don't call it. I think there's one holding call on TJ Watt so far this year. He gets held every single play.
Yeah, it's amazing. And TJ Watt now getting double teamed back-to-back weeks, but still making an impact. And even this past Sunday night against the Jets, he got in there to bat down an Aaron Rodgers pass in the second half. That was key for the Steelers at that point in the football game. So, and of course, the big 2 forced fumbles against the Raiders 2 weeks ago as well. So, yeah, even though TJ Watt's getting double teamed, he's still trying to, still making an impact one way or another. But Alex Highsmith, big game on the other side. Here's another name for you, Rich. Peyton Wilson, the rookie. He has 10 tackles this past week. I thought he did a great job at the inside linebacker position. And, of course, the big thing on Peyton Wilson was, if he stays healthy, because he's had an injury past in college. So far here in 2024, he's been healthy. And I almost think this past Sunday night against the Jets was kind of his coming out party. He did very well at that inside linebacker position.
We noticed Peyton Wilson from day one. He's the first one out on the field, the last one to leave. And I said this before, I'm not going to compare him to Sidney Crosby, but he has that Sidney Crosby type work ethic. He's the first one out there, the last one to leave. He's always picking everyone's brain. He's just a good guy. And obviously, he's a good player. He was a guy that should have went in the first round, right? And those 2 knee injuries, I don't think he has he doesn't have either MCL or something no ACLs or something, but he can still go out there and play football. And and you can see the difference in this defense when they have inside linebackers making plays. That's what they were trying to find for so many years. Devin Bush didn't work out. I love Landon Roberts. That guy is a playmaker. He is a football player. He's a good guy in that locker room for this team. And then Patrick Queen, I know a lot of people have been down on him the first couple weeks, but it takes some time to get acclimated to this defense. And I think you've seen that the last couple weeks too with Patrick Queen. I think the best free agent signing on this team right now is Deshaun Elliott. That guy is making plays. I know you could say, hey, he got beat on that touchdown to Dallas, but he was in good position. It was just a good play by Dallas and Dak Prescott. I really like the way Deshaun Elliott and all those upgrades, whether it's drafting Peyton Wilson or signing a guy like Deshaun Elliott or bringing in a guy like Patrick Queen, they've all made huge impacts on this defense this year.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point on Deshaun Elliott coming up, getting him free agent from the Dallas Cowboys this past offseason. And not only is he making an impact in the secondary, but he's been able to step up and shut down the running game too and make plays for tackle for losses multiple times this season. Good call on Deshaun Elliott. He's been huge. And Dante Jackson too. I know he was banged up this past week against the Jets in that game, but Dante Jackson, who they got in the Deontay Johnson trade from the Carolina Panthers, he's been pretty big too, opposite side of Joey Porter Jr.
I didn't mean to leave Dante Jackson out. That guy's a playmaker, and they need another corner out there. And that looks to be a wonderful trade right now. Plus, Dante Jackson's another good guy. They've got a lot of good guys in that locker room. I had a chance to interview him. I do a one-on-one with guys every week, and Dante Jackson was the first one I think I did this year before that opening game in Atlanta. And I really like his playmaking ability out there. I mean, he set the tone early for the Steelers defense with the interception to help them win early on in the season down there in Atlanta. I think this defense is a makeup of a championship defense. I'm not going to say that they're going to get to the Super Bowl, but I think they potentially can win a game in the playoffs. And then you never know what can happen, especially if that offense can score points. And I think that's the biggest Achilles heel with the Steelers. If they get into a game, a high scoring game with say even a team like the Bengals, who I think are still a scary team because they can outscore you. I don't know if the Steelers have the ability to outscore teams right now if you get in an offensive battle, but I don't think you have to do that when you have a defense like that. This defense they're second in points allowed. So if you have a defense that's all you need to do is score 17 points every week and you're going to win, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they've been able to put up some good numbers, as we said, the last couple of weeks, and now with Russell Wilson in there, throwing the ball downfield, you have to think that they're going to continue to be on that pace to be able to put up points to support that great defense that you mentioned. We're talking to Rich Walsh from KDKA-TV and CBS Pittsburgh here on the Three Rivers podcast for this week. And Rich, let's pivot in another direction as well with the Pittsburgh Steelers and talk about the trade deadline coming up just in about a week and a half. November 5th is the NFL trade deadline. Do you think the Steelers will make a move? Wide receivers, the big hot spot right there, opposite side of George Pickens. There is no number 2 receiver on this team right now. They hoped they were going to get that with Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin III. Both those guys are number three receivers. It's pretty clear. But do you think the Steelers will be active between now and November 5th? And do you think they'll go after another receiver opposite side of George Pickens?
I think they'll be active and do their due diligence, right? But who's out there that's going to be better than a Van Jefferson, an upgrade? Right now, Pat Freiermuth is your number 2 receiver. And you saw what Darnell Washington did. I mean, those two guys can make plays, and I think that's really going to help George Pickens out. Van Jefferson, I know he's another guy that stays after practice all the time and catches 300 balls every single day. But right now, he's not getting open. And Calvin Austin at times, but Justin Fields missed him at times. And you look at Calvin Austin, that was a huge drop early on in the game. If you remember that third down, that was right in his hands. You catch that when you're an NFL receiver and it hits your hands, you got to catch that. And it obviously wasn't a turning point, but if they would have lost that game, you could have pointed back to the offense was starting to get into a rhythm. You felt like Russell Wilson completes his first pass, and then you have a play like this that stalls the offense. I think it was the second or third series that Calvin Austin dropped. You can't make that you can't drop balls like that if you're the number 2 receiver. So Yes, I do think they're going to go out there and try to find someone. I don't think that they're going to give up a lot to get someone. But there's guys out there. If Jacksonville wants to trade Christian Kirk, maybe someone like him might be an upgrade. I know a lot of people are talking about Hopkins. I don't think that that's going to happen. I really don't. But plus, he's injured too, and an older guy. But I don't know who there is out there that would be a tremendous upgrade over Van Jefferson. Ayuk would have been. Now he's hurt, but Devontae Adams would have been. But you're giving up a lot for these guys, and you also have to figure in the money situation as well, too. So if there is someone out there, I know a lot of people that guy might have a Steelers uniform on right now, Roman Wilson, but he's a rookie and he hasn't had opportunities yet. I mean, to really get out there. So, do I think they're going to do something? I think they're going to investigate it, but I don't know. I don't know if they're going to pull a trigger on, a big time wide receiver that might be available.
Yeah,
I would probably say no.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Rich, because there's not a lot out there. I mean, Mike Williams for the Jets, who we saw this past week, was
Mike Williams makes a lot of money too, Ed. I mean, are they going to want to? What, he makes $15 million. That's why he didn't leave. That's why he didn't leave New York, because he got that contract. I mean, he was supposed to visit the Steelers. The Steelers liked him. I think Mike Williams could be a good fit, but are you going to want to pay him prorated $15 million? I don't know. I don't think so.
Right. And Mike Williams also, to me, kind of feels like Van Jefferson, maybe a little bit above Van Jefferson, but not much when you're trying to get that big play number 2 receiver. DeAndre Hopkins, his age is a concern there. Christian Kirk's an interesting name out of Jacksonville, if that would possibly be a name that they could possibly get. But, Jacksonville's kind of still hanging in the race, too. They're not completely out of it yet, that they're going to start dumping players. Brandon Ayuk, with all that talk during the offseason, how about that? Looks like he's out for the season now, right?
Yeah, I didn't like that trade to begin with. I didn't want it to happen. I know Ayuk he's a top 10 receiver in the NFL when he's playing to that level. But I wasn't a big fan of paying that guy $30 million a year. I didn't think he was a $30 million player, and that's the way I was looking at it. Plus, I didn't think the Steelers should have to give up, whether it was a second round pick or what, to make that happen. I didn't think it was worth it. I think the Steelers have always done a great job at drafting receivers in the second round, finding receivers out there. That's how they found George Pickens. That's how they found Juju Smith. But Juju Smith obviously needed another receiver next to him to be that productive. So I think they can go find someone. But the problem is this door is only open for how long, right? To be a playoff contender. They need to find someone now. You can't draft someone now, unfortunately. You got to wait till April to draft that receiver in the second round. So you're right. If they think that they need to make a move, they're going to have to do something by the trade deadline. That's the only way that you're going to take advantage of it this year.
And that trade deadline, November 5th, coming up here in about a week and a half. So it'll be interesting to see how the next week and a half plays on. Of course, the Steelers have their bye week after next Monday night as well. So there will be some time in between there to possibly bring somebody in and get them ready for when they come out of the bye week and they're ready to go. Rich, let's talk a little bit about the AFC North. Last night on Monday Night Football, the Ravens come back and beat Tampa Bay 41-31. A little bit of a shootout there after they were down early in that game. Over 500 yards total offense for the Ravens between Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. That offense is performing at a high level. 218 total points scored in the first 17 games. But defensively, it's not the same Ravens defense we've seen in the past. They've been exposed quite a few times this year. They've given up 180 points so far through the first 7 games of the season. Then you have the Bengals, who are 3-4. They've now won 2 straight games. And the Browns are pretty much dead on arrival, right? 1-6. Deshaun Watson's out for the season now. So you have to start thinking that the Browns are probably pretty much out of it at 1-6. But Cincinnati, they still scare me too. You mentioned that just a little bit ago. 3-4. Joe Burrow at the quarterback position, and the Ravens right now offensively performing at a high level.
Yeah, the Bengals are the scary team for me. Obviously, I thought the Ravens were the best team in the NFL, definitely the best team in the AFC before the season. I'm sure you were. I was really surprised they lost 2 games so far, 5-2. So that offense just looks, that's going to be a tough one for the Steelers. But the Steelers have always been good against the Ravens and John Harbaugh. I expect no matter who's playing for on the Ravens offense, that game's going to be close. You're right about the defense. Not quite as good, especially, I mean, you saw Humphreys got hurt last night too. So if they lose him for any amount of time, that's going to impact them. But the Steelers aren't going to be playing the Ravens for a while. Yeah, they could be. They might still only have 2 losses by that point and be the hottest team in the league. The Steelers needed to catch them early on, but the Bengals are the one team that scares me. If the Steelers need to come out of this division 4-2, I think. I don't know how you do it. If you split with every team and take 2 off the Browns, that's what you have to do. You have to split with the Bengals and you have to split with the Ravens. And I think they will. I think the Steelers are every bit as good. They don't have the offense that the Ravens have, but they have a way better defense. They don't have the offense that the Bengals have, but they have a way better defense. So if you can somehow hold those teams to 17 points, you're in business, and that's how you win games.
You even think back on last year, they went 5-1 against this division. The only loss was that loss at Cleveland, which could have went either way. That was the game that Matt Canada, I think that was his last game, right, as offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
They got rid of him right after that.
Remember, they didn't play any starting quarterbacks either. That was another thing that helped them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And that's they almost go unbeaten in the division last year. But I agree. They got to split with the Bengals and the Ravens and then try to sweep the Browns, you hope, at least as their season is heading in the opposite direction. Next Monday night, Rich, the Steelers host the New York Giants, who have had their struggles so far this year. If the Steelers can get that win, they will be 6-2 at the bye week, which at the beginning of the season, if anybody would have mentioned 6-2 at the bye week, we all would have signed up for that for the black and gold. But they have a good opportunity in front of them to beat the Giants on Monday Night Football. Not a trap game, I hope, for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, right? It kind of looks like a trap game. You hope not. One good thing is the Steelers, one way or another over the course of the years, have always played very well on Monday Night Football, especially at home.
Yeah, I think they've been great on Monday night. I think the reason it's not a trap game, they're not looking ahead to a big game the following week. It's a bye week. So they're always good on Monday nights. The Giants obviously stink. This was the better of the New York teams, I thought, when you were playing the back-to-back New York teams. So I think there's a different atmosphere at the stadium when it's a primetime game, a Monday night game. These guys get up for those primetime games. You're the only team. Everyone's watching you guys. I think, and they've been so successful on Monday nights, and they've been good against NFC teams as well too. So, and they're good at home. I think this is a good matchup for the Steelers, but I also thought the Indianapolis Colts were a good matchup for the Steelers. I also thought they should have beat Dallas. So you never know what can happen, but this would be a huge letdown if they lose this game. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. This is the game that they must win, and going into the break at 6-2, everyone would sign up for it. It was imperative that they got off to a good start because the last 9 games of the season are brutal, right? And now it even looks worse for the Steelers when how well Washington's playing. You didn't even expect. You thought that would be a win. That's the game I think is going to be tough for the Steelers going to Washington. But this game they should win, and then they'll have some time to get ready for Washington in that stretch run.
Rich, we have a few more minutes left with you here on the Three Rivers podcast. I know you're a big baseball fan. You're a big Bucco fan. Let's talk briefly about the Pirates and about Major League Baseball. Before we get to the Buccos, let me get your thoughts. The World Series is set. The LA Dodgers and the New York Yankees playing for the World Series. Your thoughts on the World Series, and then we'll talk Buccos.
I think the Dodgers are going to win. I'm always going to root for the National League. Ohtani is amazing. He's probably the best that's ever played the game. I think obviously it's going to be a great World Series, I think. But I'm going to root for the National League here. And, it's a shame that the Pirates aren't playing this time of the year, right?
Your thoughts on the 2024 Pirates? A little bit of a letdown. The good news was, and Brian, who's always on with us, he's the Bucco guy. He watches everything, every single minute, every single inning during the Pirates season. Not that I don't, but he's definitely diehard with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he's all in with them. And we talked about it. One good news for the Pirates was when training camp started for the Steelers, normally the Pirates just completely go away. This year, They were still in the headlines. You were still talking about them on KDKA. In late July. That was the good news. The bad news is once the month of August started, that's when they started to tank and their season went the opposite direction, and a little bit of a disappointment at that point of the season to see where they finished. But your thoughts on the 2024 Pirates, and also your thoughts on this offseason, what they need to do to try to finally break back into the playoff conversation next season.
And I'm one of the few guys in this city that has Bucko fever. I talk about it all the time. I'm just praying that they're good at some point again. I just don't like the way Major League Baseball is set up. There needs to be a salary floor and a salary cap, or definitely a salary floor. Until baseball changes that, this is what we're going to see in Pittsburgh, and it stinks. But they have to spend more money. There's no question about it. And I know a lot of people might question that some of these Pirates, that the loyalists and might say that no, they don't, they just got to build through. I get it, you have to build too, but you also have to add the pieces, and now they got to add the pieces. They're close, right? This was definitely a disappointing 2024 season, there's no question about it, especially what you showed us early on, especially when Paul Skeens came up here. Jaron Jones, they got Mitch Keller, they got a good starting rotation, and now you got to get that bat. I think you definitely have to figure out. I think Bart can be your catcher. You got to figure out what you have in someone like Henry Davis. That's what you have to figure out. Can he play anywhere for you? You got to play him to be able to trade him. You can't trade him now. You're not going to get anything for him. You got to figure out first base, right? IKF's your shortstop. I love the move of O'Neal Cruz to center field. I was saying that for months. I'm glad he's the best athlete on the team. You move him to a very athletic position, he's going to be able to go from shortstop to center field. There's no question about it. Brian Wilson is your left fielder. I heard some rumblings about potentially moving him to first, but then you have to go find a left fielder. I'm not sold on right field either right now. I do like their infield, and outside of Brian Hayes, he has to get right. But I feel like that they're close, right? They're close. They got pieces in the minor leagues. You got to add pieces now in free agency. You got to spend the money. I was at that press conference with Ben Cherington and asked him a couple questions. One of the questions I asked him is, can you even get a free agent that wants to sign here? Because it's been so bad, and you see the way the way that they're perceived sometimes, not paying guys at the end of the year when they were getting bonuses, whether it's IKF or cutting Tellez or any of these guys. To save a couple $100,000. I get it's a business, but at some point the owner has to take pride in owning a professional sports team, and I feel like that's lost sometimes. I'm really hoping they promised the fans for the last few years that when they were close, they would do something in the offseason to put them over the edge. I want to see it happen this year.
We had Rob King on last week talking a little bit of Pirates baseball at the end as well. And he kind of said the exact same thing you just said, Rich. You got to build around those three pitchers, right? With, Jared Jones, Mitch Keller, and of course, Paul Skeens. And so when you have those three pieces in place and they got some decent pitching in the minor league as well that they can bring up here in the next year or two, that's a huge part of this, but you got to have the bats, you got to have the offense. And I think that's where this offseason, in particular, this offseason is a very important one for this upper management and for the Pittsburgh Pirates to put those other pieces of the puzzle in place. And as you said, hopefully make that next leap next season in 2025. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I liked what they did. They were kind of aggressive at the trade deadline. I would have rather seen a guy like Chisholm come here. But they at least they went out and did something, which before they don't usually do that. At least they went out and did something. But you got to stop being. I look, instead of signing 10 guys for the 60 million or 15 guys for the amount of money that they spent over the last couple of years, go sign 2 or 3. Spend a lot more money on quality players than quantity. And I think they would be better off if they did that. And the one area that really let the Pirates down this year was the bullpen, David Bednar. And I think if he doesn't have the year he has, they would have been in a better spot. They would have had a better record. But you got to give him another chance back there, right? But I would also sign another middle reliever too. So they need a first baseman. They need probably an outfielder, and I think starting pitching is pretty solid. They could go probably 60, but middle reliever too.
Very important offseason for the Pittsburgh Pirates, that's for sure. And Rich, we want to thank you for coming on the Three Rivers podcast. We know you have to get to a haircut. You might have the best hair on local Pittsburgh news.
That's the only thing I got going.
I don't have to worry about that.
That's the only thing I got going for me. We brought up Dante Jackson a little earlier. He calls me Homelander, so I started watching that show, The Boys. Now.
Well, you got the look. Pomp has the wardrobe, and you got the look for the hair. I don't have to worry about either of those.
I got to get that shirt that Pomp has with the wine glass.
Let's do it, man. Let's get him on here with you soon. Rich, we want to thank you. Make sure you check out Rich Walsh on KDKA-TV, CBS Pittsburgh. Rich, we know you're on the nightly sports call. You're on the Steeler pre-games and the post-games and everything else. Make sure you check out Rich Walsh here locally. And, Rich, we appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ed. I appreciate it. Anytime.
All right, that will do it for the Three Rivers podcast for this week. Couple programming notes. We'll have the WPIAL kickoff show live from Beaver High School, where Beaver battles Avonworth this upcoming Friday night, 6 o'clock, right here on Oneburg for week 9. Hard to believe that's the last week of the WPIAL regular season, but that's coming up this Friday night. And Brian and I will be on after Monday Night Football next Monday night for the Steeler postgame show as well. And we'll be back on next week for another episode of the Three Rivers podcast. For Rich Walsh, Ed Troop signing off for now. We'll see you next week right here